The slap would come later. But long before a hand cut through air, long before the lobby went silent, the story began the way most humiliations begin. Quietly, invisibly, with a man standing in plain sight and still not being seen. Ethan Ward arrived at Azure Cove Resort with a small suitcase in one hand and the weight of a year on his shoulders. He had driven 3 hours from the city without stopping, the kind of drive that wasn't long enough to feel like a journey and yet long enough to make your body start bargaining with you for rest. His neck ached. His lower back pulsed with that familiar dull pain he carried like a second wallet. He rolled his shoulders once, as if that could erase the weeks behind him. The ocean was close. He could smell it even from the parking lot. The salt, the warm wind, the faint sweetness of sunscreen carried from other people's vacations. Somewhere beyond the palms and the glass facade, waves arrived and left with a patience he envied. This trip was supposed to be simple. 2 quiet days alone before his son arrived on Saturday. 2 mornings where Ethan could wake up without checking a clock, without calculating expenses, without scanning a room for dangers that didn't exist, but still lived in his mind. He had promised his son, Mason, they would build the biggest sandcastle on the beach. Mason had taken the promise seriously. He had drawn a blueprint in crayon and tucked it into Ethan's suitcase like it was a contract. Ethan hadn't come here to be impressive. In fact, he had done the opposite of what people in his position usually did. He booked the room using his personal account, not the business one. No assistant, no advance calls, no notes in the system. He didn't want the staff lined up at the entrance like soldiers. He didn't want someone calling him sir with that careful, flinching politeness people used when they knew the price of your watch. He wanted to see the place the way an ordinary guest would. As a father, as a tired man, as someone who paid for a room and expected nothing except basic decency. The resort rose in front of him like something built for photographs. Glass walls reflecting the late afternoon sun, a fountain perfectly timed to sparkle, white stone so clean it looked untouched by weather. Inside, chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks. The lobby was wide and tall, designed to make you feel small in a way that was supposed to feel luxurious. Ethan adjusted the strap of his worn backpack and walked toward the entrance. The wheels of his suitcase clicked unevenly on the pavement, one side catching slightly as if even his luggage had learned to limp. The automatic doors slid open. Cool air washed over him. A security guard stood near the entrance, uniform crisp, posture straight. Ethan nodded, an instinctive, polite acknowledgement, the kind you give to anyone doing their job. The guard's eyes flicked toward Ethan for half a second, then dropped to his phone. No greeting. No welcome. No movement. Ethan kept walking, telling himself it didn't matter. People had bad days. People got tired. He had survived worse than a bored security guard. A bellman stood several steps away, leaning against a luggage cart, thumb moving across his screen. Ethan made eye contact, half expecting the man to straighten, to do what he was paid to do. The bellman's gaze slid over Ethan's clothes, plain t-shirt, scuffed sneakers, tired face, and then slid away as if Ethan had become part of the furniture. Ethan tightened his grip on the suitcase handle and pulled it toward the front desk himself. Marble floors gleamed under soft lighting. Everything smelled expensive. Citrus cleaner, polished wood, and something floral that tried too hard. Staff moved in practiced lines, gliding around the lobby like they belonged to a different world. Yet none of them looked at him. It wasn't a dramatic rejection. It was worse. It was the quiet certainty that you don't matter enough to be acknowledged. Ethan reached the front desk and set his suitcase down beside him. The receptionist, a young man in a navy suit, was typing on his computer. Ethan waited. The receptionist kept typing. Ethan cleared his throat softly. The receptionist glanced up for half a second, then returned to his screen. Ethan felt irritation rise, then pressed it back down the way he had learned to press down everything that threatened to spill: anger, fear, exhaustion. He had a child. He had responsibilities. He couldn't afford to be reactive. He couldn't afford to let pride control the room. He waited another moment, then spoke. "Hi, I have a reservation under Ward. I'd like to check in, please." The receptionist looked up again, this time longer, his eyes taking inventory. Not of Ethan's name, not of his tiredness, of his appearance, of what he assumed Ethan could offer. His fingers moved slowly across the keyboard, as if typing was suddenly heavy labor. He clicked, stared at the screen, then finally spoke. "Check-in is at 3 o'clock. You'll need to wait about 2 more hours." Ethan blinked. He had driven 3 hours. His back hurt. His head hurt. All he wanted was to drop his bag, take a shower, and lie down for a while before the world demanded something from him again. He kept his voice calm. "I understand," he said. "I'm just pretty tired from the drive. Is there any chance I could get into the room a little early? I'd really appreciate it." The receptionist didn't even pretend to consider. "Policy is policy," he said. "You'll need to wait." Ethan nodded slowly, swallowing the frustration like it was medicine. He was about to ask where he could sit when the doors behind him slid open again. He heard the smooth, expensive hum of luggage wheels crossing marble, a sound so quiet it felt like it belonged to people who never had to drag anything heavy. Ethan turned slightly. A man in his 50s walked in wearing a tailored gray suit. His shoes shone like mirrors. A designer briefcase hung from his hand as if it weighed nothing. The man moved with the confidence of someone who had never entered a room without being noticed, and instantly, the lobby changed. The bellman straightened as if a switch had been flipped. Phone gone, smile on. He walked briskly toward the new guest. "Good afternoon, sir," the bellman said warmly. "Welcome back to Azure Cove. May I take your luggage?" The well-dressed man handed over his briefcase without a word. The bellman accepted it like it was sacred. Behind the desk, the receptionist's face brightened into a real smile. He waved someone over. A staff member appeared with a tray, a folded warm towel, and a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. "Please have a seat, Mr. Reynolds," the receptionist said. "We'll have you checked in right away." Ethan stood there, suitcase still beside him, watching the entire scene unfold as if it were a play he hadn't been told he was in. He looked at the towel, the juice, the sofa by the window. Then he looked at the receptionist who had told him to wait. Something tightened in his chest, quiet, heavy, unmistakable. Not anger yet. Just the cold realization of what he was actually being asked to do. He was being asked to accept that respect had a price tag. Ethan's hand rested on the handle of his suitcase, and his thumb brushed the edge of the side pocket where Mason's crayon drawing was tucked inside. He took a slow breath. Then he turned back toward the desk, his voice still calm, but no longer willing to disappear. "Excuse me," he said. And the receptionist, finally, looked at him like a problem that had learned how to speak. Because in the next moment, Ethan was going to ask a question that the entire lobby would hear. And once the question was asked, nothing here would stay the same. And that was when the word VIP entered the story. "Excuse me." Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't lean in aggressively. He didn't perform anger for the room. He simply spoke, clear enough to be heard, calm enough to be undeniable. The receptionist looked up with that same blank expression, but this time there was a flicker beneath it. A small tightening around the eyes. The quiet annoyance of someone being forced to acknowledge a person they had already decided didn't matter. "Yes?" the receptionist said, tone clipped, as if Ethan had interrupted something important. Ethan kept his hand on the suitcase handle. A steady point of contact. something physical to remind himself that he was grounded, that he was in control of his own body, his own breath. "That gentleman arrived after I did," Ethan said. His words were polite but firm. "You told me I have to wait 2 hours, but you're checking him in right away. Can you explain why?" The lobby felt different for a second. Not silent, not yet, but attention shifted, like curtains pulling slightly open. People didn't stop walking, but they slowed. A couple near the lounge turned their heads. A woman in a sun hat glanced over the rim of her sunglasses. Even the bellman's smile faltered for half a beat before he recovered. The receptionist's fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. He glanced toward the man in the gray suit, Mr. Reynolds, who was now seated on the plush sofa with a warm towel in his hands, looking as if the world had always been designed to comfort him. Then the receptionist looked back at Ethan, and something in his posture changed. Not fear, not respect, a kind of mild impatience like a teacher being questioned by a student. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "Mr. Reynolds is a VIP guest." Ethan absorbed the phrase. VIP. A small set of letters, 3 syllables that carried the weight of a gate swinging open or slamming shut. He nodded slowly. "I see," Ethan said. "So because he's VIP, he can check in early." "That's correct," the receptionist replied quickly, relieved to have an answer that sounded official. "VIP guests have priority privileges." Ethan did not argue the existence of loyalty programs. He understood them. He understood tiers and benefits and the logic of business. But what he also understood, what years of living with less had taught him, was that people used policies the way they used umbrellas, not to stop the rain, but to avoid getting wet while someone else drowned. He looked at the warm towel again, the orange juice, the way the staff stood a little straighter near Mr. Reynolds. Then he looked at the receptionist. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said softly. The receptionist's eyes narrowed slightly. "What?" Ethan's voice remained even. "If I hadn't asked, would anyone have explained this to me? Or would I have just been told to stand there and wait while the lobby served someone else in front of my face?" The receptionist shifted in his chair. "That's just how it works, sir." Ethan exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. He had lived through enough dismissals to recognize the shape of this one. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a busy moment. It was a decision. Not in a memo, not in a policy manual, but in a person's mind. Ethan leaned forward slightly, just enough to show he was present. "I made a reservation," he said. "I paid in full. I drove 3 hours to get here. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking to be treated like I belong in the same room." The receptionist's lips pressed into a thin line. "Sir, I don't make the rules." Ethan nodded. "No," he said. "But you're choosing how to treat people while you follow them." That sentence landed with more weight than Ethan intended, or maybe exactly as much as it needed to. The receptionist glanced down at his keyboard as if hoping the screen could rescue him. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "VIP check-in is a benefit. If you want that, you can sign up for the program." Ethan almost smiled. It wasn't funny, but it had that strange absurdity that sometimes shows up in painful moments, like someone offering you a discount coupon while your house burns down. "My son is coming this weekend," Ethan said, and he didn't know why he said it, except that the truth often rises when you're tired. "He's 7. This is his first time seeing the ocean up close." The receptionist stared, confused at the sudden personal detail, as if Ethan had violated a rule by being human. Ethan continued, voice still steady. "I promised him this place would feel safe, that he wouldn't have to prove himself to be treated kindly. I'm standing here trying to make sure that promise is true." For the first time, the receptionist looked uncomfortable in a way that wasn't just annoyance. His gaze flickered away, then back. A second of hesitation. But then the old armor slid back into place. "I can't override check-in policy," he said. "If you'd like to complain, I can call the manager." Ethan held the receptionist's eyes for a moment. Manager. The word felt like a door. Either it would open into accountability, or it would open into something worse. "Please," Ethan said, "call the manager." The receptionist reached for the phone on the desk. His hands moved quickly now, suddenly competent. He pressed a few buttons and spoke in a lower voice, eyes half avoiding Ethan, half resenting him for making the call necessary. When he hung up, he gestured vaguely toward the side of the lobby. "Someone will be with you shortly." Ethan stepped back from the desk. He didn't sit. He didn't pull out his phone. He didn't distract himself the way people did when they were being quietly humiliated, pretending they weren't. He simply stood. His hand rested on the handle of his suitcase. And as he waited, he became aware of his own reflection in the glossy marble floor. An ordinary man, slightly hunched from fatigue, holding onto a worn suitcase as if it was the last thing he could control. He glanced down at the side pocket where Mason's drawing was tucked. 2 stick figures on a beach, a bright yellow sun. Crayon waves. A child's version of peace. Ethan's throat tightened, not with sadness, but with a deep, stubborn tenderness that he had learned to protect at all costs. This wasn't just about early check-in. It was about what the lobby had taught him in the first 5 minutes, that respect here was currency. And if that was true, then Ethan had a responsibility to do something he hated doing, to refuse to play along. Footsteps echoed across the marble, sharp, confident, fast. A woman emerged from the hallway behind the front desk, blazer tailored, hair pulled into a tight bun, face already set in the expression of someone who believed she was arriving to correct a nuisance. She stopped a few feet from Ethan and looked him up and down with clinical impatience. "I'm Clara Hawthorne," she said. "Operations manager." Her gaze lingered for half a second on Ethan's scuffed sneakers. Then she lifted her chin slightly. "What seems to be the problem?" And Ethan, still calm, still controlled, felt the air in the lobby shift again, as if the story had just stepped onto a sharper edge. Because some doors, once opened, don't lead back to silence. Clara Hawthorne did not offer a seat. She stood with her weight evenly distributed, hands loosely clasped in front of her, posture perfect in a way that suggested long practice. The kind of posture that came from years of being told she was good at keeping things under control. Ethan noticed that first. Not her expression, not the cut of her blazer, but the stillness. She wasn't here to listen. She was here to contain. "Yes," she said again, her voice smooth and efficient. "What seems to be the issue?" Ethan met her eyes. He didn't rush. He had learned, through years of boardrooms and late-night negotiations he never talked about, that speed was often mistaken for confidence. He let the moment breathe. "I arrived a few minutes ago," he said. "I was told I needed to wait 2 hours to check in. A guest who arrived after me was checked in immediately. I asked for an explanation." Clara turned her head slightly toward the receptionist. "Is that accurate?" "Yes," the receptionist said quickly. "Mr. Reynolds is a VIP guest." Clara nodded once, as if a puzzle piece had slid neatly into place. "That would explain it," she said, then turned back to Ethan. "Our VIP guests receive priority check-in as part of their loyalty benefits." Ethan didn't interrupt. He waited for the rest. There was always a rest. "But," Clara continued, her tone already cooling, "you booked a standard room. Early check-in is not guaranteed for standard reservations." The word standard landed with a dull weight. Ethan glanced around the lobby. The chandeliers, the marble, the art on the walls that looked like it had been chosen by committee rather than love. "I understand loyalty programs," he said. "What I don't understand is why I was ignored from the moment I walked in." Clara's eyebrows lifted a fraction. "Ignored?" "Yes," Ethan said. "No greeting, no acknowledgement. I stood at the desk while your staff looked at their phones. That has nothing to do with check-in time." Clara tilted her head slightly, the way someone did when they were deciding how seriously to take a complaint. "Our staff handle many guests," she said. "Sometimes there are delays." Ethan nodded. "Delays are understandable," he said. "Dismissal is not." That caught her attention. Just a flicker, a tightening around the mouth. Clara exhaled, her patience thinning. She stepped half a pace closer, lowering her voice as if the issue were suddenly private, even though the lobby had grown noticeably quieter. "Mr. Ward." "Mr. Ward," she said. "Azure Cove is a 5-star resort. We operate at a certain standard. Our guests expect efficiency and exclusivity." Ethan felt the word settle between them. Exclusivity. It was said neutrally, like a fact. Not like a warning. Not like an apology. "But," Ethan said calmly, "I am a guest." Clara's eyes sharpened. "You are," she said. "And you're being offered exactly what you paid for." There it was, the invisible line made visible. Ethan rested both hands on the suitcase handle now, not gripping, just grounding himself. "What I paid for," he said, "was a room. What I expected was basic respect. The second shouldn't be conditional." Clara crossed her arms. "Respect is not the issue," she said. "Policy is." Ethan almost smiled again, this time without humor. "Policies don't roll their eyes," he said. "People do." The receptionist shifted uncomfortably behind the desk. Clara's jaw tightened. She glanced briefly around the lobby, registering the watching eyes, the slight stillness in the air. Then she looked back at Ethan, and something hardened. "If you're unhappy," she said, "you are welcome to cancel your reservation." The words were polite. The message was not. Ethan felt a quiet certainty settle into his chest. This conversation was no longer about timing, or towels, or juice. This was about who Clara believed belonged here. "I didn't come here to argue," Ethan said. "I came here to rest before my son arrives. I asked a question. I got an answer that had nothing to do with fairness." Clara's lips pressed together. "Fairness," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "This is hospitality, Mr. Ward, not a courtroom." Ethan met her gaze steadily. "Hospitality," he said, "means making people feel welcome." Clara's voice dropped. "We cater to a certain clientele," she said. "That's not discrimination. That's business." The air changed. There it was, the thing Ethan had been circling without naming. He straightened slightly, his shoulders easing back. "That is discrimination," he said quietly. "When service is determined by how someone looks, not by the fact that they're human." Clara's eyes flashed. She took a step closer, lowering her voice further, sharp now. "This conversation is over," she said. "If you can't appreciate how we operate here, perhaps this isn't the right place for you." Around them, someone coughed. A chair scraped softly. A phone camera shifted. Ethan didn't move. He felt the strange calm that sometimes came right before a storm, the kind that made everything feel slow, deliberate. He thought of Mason's drawing, of the promise he'd made, of the look on his son's face when he talked about the ocean. He wasn't going to teach his child that dignity was something you surrendered to avoid discomfort. Ethan reached into his pocket. Clara noticed. Her mouth curved into a thin, dismissive smile. "What are you doing now?" she asked. "Calling your lawyer?" Ethan didn't answer. He unlocked his phone, scrolled once, and stopped. The name on the screen was not a law firm. It was not security. It was a single contact, one he rarely used because when he did, things changed. He lifted the phone, and Clara Hawthorne, watching him with open skepticism, had no idea that the next few minutes were about to erase everything she thought she knew about power. Because when respect is denied long enough, silence eventually becomes a decision, and Ethan Ward had just made his. Ethan held the phone loosely in his hand, not to threaten, not to perform, just to be ready. Clara Hawthorne watched him with the practiced calm of someone who believed she still had the upper hand. Her eyes flicked briefly to the device, then back to his face, already cataloging him again. Plain clothes, tired posture, no visible leverage. She straightened her blazer. "Sir," she said, tone clipped now, sharpened by irritation, "if you're attempting to intimidate staff, I suggest you stop. This is a private business." Ethan didn't raise the phone. He didn't dial yet. "I'm not intimidating anyone," he replied. "I'm deciding whether to continue this conversation." Clara gave a short laugh, humorless. "This conversation ended the moment you accused us of discrimination." Ethan looked past her, just briefly, to the lobby. The bellman stood frozen near the luggage cart, hands clasped in front of him now, no phone in sight. The receptionist stared too intently at his screen, as if staring hard enough could erase the last 10 minutes. A few guests lingered nearby, pretending to examine artwork, pretending not to listen. Everyone felt it. The tension wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. "You know," Ethan said quietly, turning back to Clara, "there's a difference between policy and judgment." Clara crossed her arms. "And you think you're here to teach us that difference?" "No," Ethan said. "I think you already know it." That landed harder than he expected. Clara's jaw tightened. For the first time since she'd walked out, her expression cracked, not into fear, but into something sharper, defensive, cornered. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice again. "You walk into a 5-star resort dressed like that," she said, "and you expect what, exactly? Red carpet service?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, and the moment they did, Ethan saw it. Not anger, not embarrassment, recognition. He didn't interrupt her. He let the sentence exist in the open air, unrescued. "That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Ethan said softly. "How I look." Clara straightened, realizing too late what she'd revealed. "That's not what I said." "It is," Ethan replied. "You just said it differently." A quiet murmur rippled somewhere behind them. Clara glanced around again. The audience had grown. She exhaled sharply. "This has gone far enough," she said. "I don't have time for this. If you'd like to wait, you can wait. If not, you're welcome to leave." Ethan nodded once. "I am waiting," he said. "Just not for a room." Clara stared at him, clearly unsure how to respond. "What exactly do you think is going to happen here?" she asked. "You make a scene, we cave, and suddenly everything changes?" Ethan met her gaze steadily. "Things only change," he said, "when people stop pretending this is normal." Something in Clara snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but internally. The kind of snap that comes when someone who has always been praised for control feels it slipping. She took another step closer. Her voice dropped further, but it wasn't calm anymore. "You're embarrassing yourself," she said. "And you're disrupting other guests." Ethan didn't move. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat now, steady but insistent. He could feel the old instinct, the one that told him to de-escalate, to swallow the moment, to protect the peace, even if it cost him something essential. He ignored it. "I'm standing here," he said, "because your staff ignored me, because you dismissed me, because you decided who deserved courtesy before I ever spoke." Clara's eyes flashed. "You don't know what it takes to run a place like this," she said sharply. "You don't know the pressure, the expectations." Ethan raised his hand. Not abruptly, not aggressively, just enough to stop her. "I know pressure," he said. "I know expectations, and I know what it's like to be judged before you open your mouth." Clara stared at his raised hand as if it offended her. "Lower your hand," she said. Ethan did. But the calm between them was gone. The air felt brittle now, like glass waiting for a crack. Clara turned slightly, angling her body so she could address both Ethan and the room. "This discussion is concluded," she announced. "Sir, you are welcome to wait quietly or take your business elsewhere." Ethan looked around once more. At the marble floors, the chandeliers, the staff who had learned when to smile and when not to. He thought of Mason again, not as a shield, not as a weapon, but as a compass. He imagined explaining this moment to his son someday, imagined saying he'd stood there and done nothing. That thought settled the decision completely. Ethan lifted his phone. This time, he didn't hesitate. Clara's expression shifted, not fear yet, but irritation tipping into something unstable. "Who are you calling?" she demanded. "Security?" Ethan looked at her. "No." He placed the phone to his ear. The line rang once, then connected. Clara's patience evaporated. Her face flushed, color rising fast and angry. "You can't just—" she started, stepping forward. Ethan didn't look at her anymore. He spoke into the phone, his voice low, clear, precise. "I'm at Azure Cove," he said. "There's a situation in the lobby." Clara's breath quickened. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Ethan continued, eyes forward. "I need you to listen carefully," he said. "Because what happens next matters." Clara's hand trembled. She reached out. Not to grab the phone, not yet, but to stop the moment itself, as if she could physically interrupt consequence. And in that second, between impulse and restraint, between authority and exposure, control slipped entirely. Clara Hawthorne made a choice, and the sound of that choice would echo through the lobby louder than any raised voice ever could. Because the next moment would leave no room for pretending this was just about a room. The sound was sharp, not loud in volume, but sharp in meaning. Skin against skin. A sudden crack that cut through the polished air of the lobby like a fracture in glass. For a fraction of a second, no one understood what had happened. Then everything stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Footsteps froze. Even the fountain near the entrance seemed to lose its rhythm. The chandeliers overhead glowed on, indifferent, as if light itself refused to react. Clara Hawthorne's hand hovered in the air, fingers slightly curled, the momentum of the motion still traveling through her arm. She had slapped him, not in private, not in confusion, but in the open, before staff, guests, witnesses. Ethan's head had turned slightly with the impact. Nothing dramatic. No stumble, no gasp. He stood there, motionless. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound itself. Ethan did not touch his face. That detail would stay with people later. The fact that he didn't flinch, didn't raise a hand in return, didn't even check where she had struck him. As if the slap had landed on something already armored by years of restraint. Slowly he turned his head back to center. His expression was not anger, it was clarity. Clara seemed to realize what she had done only after the moment had passed. Her chest rose and fell faster now. Her mouth opened as if to speak, to justify, to command, to reverse time. But nothing came out. Behind her, the receptionist stared openly now, face drained of color. The bellman had taken a step backward, eyes wide, hands clasped tightly in front of him as if he could disappear into the uniform. A woman near the lounge raised a hand to her mouth. Someone whispered, "Did she just—" Ethan remained still. The phone was still in his hand. The call had not ended. The voice on the other end was waiting. Ethan lifted the phone back to his ear. His voice, when he spoke, was steady, lower than before, stripped of any remaining warmth. "Yes," he said. "I'm still here." Clara laughed suddenly. It was short, sharp, unhinged. "Oh, this is ridiculous," she said, her voice too loud, bouncing off marble. "You provoke staff, you disrupt guests, and now you're standing there like this is going to work out for you?" She took a breath, squared her shoulders, trying to reclaim the room through volume. "You assaulted me," Ethan said quietly. The words landed like weights. Clara's laughter faltered. "That's absurd," she snapped. You struck me," Ethan continued, not raising his voice. "In front of witnesses. That's not a misunderstanding." The word witnesses rippled through the space. Clara's eyes flicked around the lobby now, finally seeing what she had ignored before. The phones, the faces, the stillness. She swallowed. Ethan turned slightly, angling his body away from her, not in retreat but in finality. He spoke into the phone. "I need Clara Hawthorne removed from her position immediately," he said. "Effective now." Clara froze. "And I want the front desk staff on this shift suspended pending review." The receptionist made a sound, something between a breath and a protest, but didn't speak. Clara stepped forward, her confidence cracking into disbelief. "You can't just— Who do you think you are?" she demanded. "This is my operation. You don't make decisions here." Ethan turned his head just enough to look at her. Then he looked away again. "I'll explain upstairs," he said into the phone. "Yes, I'm sure." He ended the call. Clara stared at him as if he had just spoken in another language. Then her phone rang. The sound was small, ordinary, and devastating. She looked down at the screen. The name that appeared did not belong to security. It did not belong to legal. It read, "Executive Office." The color drained from her face so quickly it was almost frightening. She answered with a trembling hand. "Hello?" Ethan watched her, not with satisfaction, not with cruelty, but with the distant calm of someone who had seen this pattern before. The moment when power realized it had miscalculated. "Yes," Clara said into the phone, voice suddenly thin. Yes, I understand." Her eyes lifted slowly to Ethan's face, then dropped again. "Yes," she repeated. "Effective immediately." She lowered the phone. For a moment, she simply stood there. 8 years of authority, of being the one who corrected others, compressed into the quiet space of a single breath. Around her, no one moved. The receptionist looked at his hands. The bellman stared at the floor. Guests watched, uncertain whether to stay or slip away. Ethan bent slightly and picked up his suitcase. The simple gesture broke something. Clara took a step toward him. "Wait," she said, her voice unsteady now. "There's been a misunderstanding." Ethan did not stop. "I was just enforcing policy," she said, words tumbling faster now. "You have to understand. We have expectations, pressure. This isn't personal." Ethan paused near the elevator, not for her, for himself. He turned his head enough to speak without facing her fully. It became personal when you decided I deserved less dignity, he said. Clara's breath hitched. I didn't know who you were, she whispered. Ethan looked at her then, directly. That, he said, is the point. The elevator chimed softly. The doors slid open. Ethan stepped inside, pulling his suitcase behind him. As the doors began to close, he caught one last glimpse of the lobby, of Clara standing in the center of it, her authority stripped bare, of staff frozen between guilt and fear. The doors shut. The elevator began its ascent. Inside the moving silence, Ethan exhaled for the first time since he had arrived. He did not feel victorious. He felt the familiar ache of having done something necessary that he never wanted to do. Above him, a room waited. Below him, a system had just realized it was no longer invisible, and in the next few minutes, the consequences would begin to unfold, quietly, methodically, and without mercy for the illusion that this had ever been a small incident. Because when a line is crossed in public, the reckoning never stays private. The elevator moved upward in near silence. Soft music played from hidden speakers, something gentle and carefully chosen, the kind meant to soothe people who had never truly been unsettled. Ethan leaned lightly against the brushed steel wall, one hand still resting on the handle of his suitcase. His cheek burned now, not sharply but with a dull, spreading warmth. The body's delayed response. He welcomed it. Pain, at least, was honest. He closed his eyes briefly, not to escape, but to steady himself. He had not planned for this, not the confrontation, not the slap, not the way the room had frozen when it happened. He had come here to sleep, to wake without an alarm, to stand barefoot in sand with his son and pretend the world was softer than it was. Instead, he had stepped into something old and deeply rooted. The elevator chimed again and slowed. The doors opened onto a quiet, carpeted hallway, hushed and immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the ocean, the water catching the last light of afternoon in slow, patient waves. Ethan stepped out. The suite door was already unlocked. He paused for a moment, registering that detail. The system had moved faster than the people in the lobby ever had. Someone, somewhere, now knew exactly who he was. He pushed the door open and rolled his suitcase inside. The room was large, understated in its luxury. Clean lines, neutral colors. A couch positioned to face the ocean, not the television. A place designed to suggest peace without demanding attention. Ethan set his suitcase down by the luggage rack but didn't open it yet. He walked to the window instead. Below, the resort looked unchanged. Guests moved along paths lined with palms. The pool shimmered. From this height, the lobby was just a bright rectangle of glass and light, no hint of the rupture that had just torn through it. That was how systems survived, Ethan thought. They looked intact from above. A knock came at the door. Ethan didn't turn immediately. He stayed where he was, watching a wave fold into itself and disappear. Another knock. Firmer. He turned then and walked to the door, opening it to reveal a man in a dark suit, early 40s, posture rigid with tension. His tie was perfectly knotted, but his hands betrayed him, clasped too tightly, fingers pressing into one another. "Mr. Ward," the man said. "My name is Daniel Reeves. I oversee operations for the Coastal Division." Ethan recognized him instantly. Quarterly reports, board summaries, the kind of face you saw in video calls framed by neutral office walls. Competent, controlled, careful. "Come in," Ethan said. Daniel stepped inside, glancing around as if expecting the room itself to judge him. He stopped near the center, hands still clasped, and took a breath. "I want to begin by apologizing," Daniel said. "What happened downstairs was unacceptable. Entirely." Ethan leaned back against the desk, arms loosely crossed. He did not respond yet. Silence stretched. Daniel cleared his throat. Clara Hawthorne has been terminated effective immediately, he continued. Security is escorting her from the premises. The front desk staff involved have been suspended pending investigation. Ethan nodded once. Not approval. Acknowledgement. We're initiating a full review, Daniel added quickly, eager to show motion, correction. Security footage, guest feedback, internal procedures. This will be handled thoroughly. Ethan turned his gaze back to the ocean. I didn't call you up here to hear what you're already doing, he said calmly. Daniel stiffened slightly. I called you up here because I want to understand how this was allowed to happen. Daniel hesitated. Clara had been efficient. Everyone said so. She kept things running. Numbers were strong. Complaints were manageable, contained, filed away under softer language. He chose his words carefully. Clara was with the resort before the acquisition, Daniel said. She had strong performance reviews. She completed all required training. Ethan nodded slowly. So the policies existed, he said. The training existed. Yes. And yet, Ethan continued, she felt comfortable enough to tell a guest he didn't belong here. Daniel said nothing. Ethan turned from the window and faced him fully now. That didn't come from nowhere, Ethan said. That came from reinforcement, from silence, from years of people learning what's rewarded and what's ignored. Daniel lowered his eyes. There were some complaints, he admitted. Nothing formal enough to trigger disciplinary action. Some online reviews, comments about tone, about staff being dismissive. And? We addressed them with coaching sessions, Daniel said. Reminders of company values. Ethan exhaled slowly. Coaching, he repeated. Reminders. Daniel heard the criticism in the pause between the words. We didn't think. That's the problem, Ethan said, not raising his voice. No one thinks hard enough until someone is humiliated in public. Daniel nodded, chastened. I take responsibility for that, he said. Ethan studied him for a moment. He saw fear there, but also something else. Willingness, the desire to fix, not just survive. That's good, Ethan said, because I'm not interested in a symbolic firing. Daniel looked up. I want a full audit, Ethan continued. Not 6 months, 2 years, guest feedback, comment cards, surveys, anything that shows patterns. I want to know how many people walked through that lobby and learned silently that they were invisible. Daniel pulled out his phone immediately, typing notes. Yes, sir. I want new training, Ethan said. Not generic modules, real scenarios, real consequences. And if someone fails, they don't stay. Yes. And one more thing, Ethan added. Daniel paused, attentive. I don't want Clara blacklisted, Ethan said. Daniel blinked. I'm not interested in destroying her life, Ethan continued. She crossed a line and she's facing the consequences. That's enough. Daniel nodded slowly. We'll handle her exit discreetly. Good. Ethan walked back to the suitcase and unzipped it. He reached inside and pulled out a folded piece of paper, smoothing it gently. Daniel watched, confused. Ethan held up the drawing. My son made this, he said. He thinks the world is fair because I tell him it should be. Daniel swallowed. I'm not trying to be a hero, Ethan said. I'm trying to be honest. Daniel slipped his phone back into his pocket. I understand, he said quietly. Ethan nodded. You can go, he said. I'll review the audit results myself. Daniel turned toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, he said. I'm sorry this happened to you. Ethan met his eyes. We failed, Daniel corrected himself. Ethan allowed a small nod. Daniel left. The room grew quiet again. Ethan placed the drawing carefully on the desk, propping it against the lamp so it faced the window. 2 stick figures, a bright sun, the ocean drawn too blue to be real. He sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, the adrenaline drained, leaving only exhaustion behind. Below him, the resort continued to function. Lights flickered on, guests laughed, music drifted up faintly. But something fundamental had shifted. Not loudly, not visibly, yet. Ethan lay back and stared at the ceiling, knowing that what came next would be harder than the confrontation itself. Because accountability, once demanded, never stayed contained. And tomorrow, the system would have to answer, not to anger, but to truth. Downstairs, the lobby tried to pretend nothing had happened. Music continued to play, soft, coastal, carefully curated. Guests resumed walking, though their pace was slower now, their glances lingering a fraction too long on the front desk. The marble floors reflected the chandeliers just as they always had. But the air had changed. Clara Hawthorne stood near the center of the lobby, her phone still in her hand, the screen dark now. The call had ended, yet her fingers remained curled around the device as if it were the only solid thing left in the room. 8 years. That number echoed in her mind, uninvited and relentless. 8 years of arriving before sunrise and leaving after dark. 8 years of managing crises, smoothing complaints, absorbing pressure from executives who never set foot behind the desk. 8 years of being told she was reliable, efficient, indispensable. And now, in less than 10 minutes, it was over. She looked around, finally seeing what she had overlooked for years. The receptionist stood rigid behind the desk, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on a point somewhere between the keyboard and the edge of the counter. The bellman hovered near the luggage cart, hands clasped, his earlier confidence replaced by something brittle and afraid. The security guard had straightened fully now, no phone in sight, his jaw tight. They all knew. Not what would happen next exactly, but that something irreversible had already begun. A woman near the lounge whispered to her partner. Someone else pretended to take a phone call and drifted toward the exit. A few guests stayed, openly watching, curiosity overtaking discomfort. Clara swallowed hard. She had always believed control was about decisiveness, about not letting moments spiral, about shutting things down before they became scenes. She had failed at all of it. Her phone vibrated again. This time the message was short. Conference room. Now. No signature. No pleasantries. Just an order. Clara felt her knees weaken slightly. She steadied herself against the edge of the front desk, the polished surface suddenly cold beneath her palm. For a fleeting moment she considered leaving, walking out the front doors into the sunlight, pretending none of this was real. But she didn't. She straightened her blazer, even though it no longer mattered, and turned toward the hallway that led away from the lobby. The receptionist noticed her movement and froze. "You're needed, too," Clara said quietly, not looking at him. "All of you." The words felt strange in her mouth now, authority without weight. They followed her in silence. The hallway was narrower, the walls plain, stripped of the elegance designed for guests. This part of the building was purely functional. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The carpet muffled their footsteps, turning the walk into something that felt ceremonial, like a procession no one had volunteered for. The conference room door was open. Inside, a long table stretched beneath recessed lighting. Chairs lined both sides, neatly arranged, untouched. At the head of the table stood a man in a dark suit, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The regional director. Clara recognized him immediately. She had met him twice in 8 years, both times during formal reviews where everything had gone very well. He did not smile now. "Sit," he said. They did. The receptionist lowered himself into a chair as if afraid it might reject him. The bellman stared at the tabletop, jaw clenched. The security guard sat upright, hands on his knees, eyes forward. Clara remained standing for half a second too long, then took her seat, spine straight, chin lifted by reflex. The regional director did not waste time. "As of this moment," he said, his voice level and cold, "Clara Hawthorne, your employment with Azure Cove Resort is terminated, effective immediately." The words hit her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to speak, to explain, to contextualize, to salvage something, but no sound came out. "Your access has been revoked," he continued. "Security will escort you from the premises within 15 minutes. The room felt smaller. He shifted his gaze to the others. "The rest of you are suspended pending investigation. We will be reviewing security footage, guest complaints, and internal communications." The receptionist's head dropped into his hands. The bellman's shoulders sagged. The security guard swallowed hard. "This is not about one incident," the director said. "It's about a pattern, and patterns don't form overnight." Clara stared at the table, her vision blurring. She thought of her mortgage, her daughter's school fees, the vacation she had postponed twice already. She thought of the guest, the man in the plain t-shirt, the calm in his voice, the way he hadn't tried to impress or threaten or beg. The director continued. "Azure Cove exists on one principle," he said. "Every guest is to be treated with dignity. What happened today was a failure of leadership, and it ends now." He stood, signaling the meeting's end. No debate, no appeal. Clara rose slowly, her legs unsteady. Outside the conference room, a security officer waited. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. The direction was clear. As they walked back through the hallway, Clara felt eyes on her. Not cruel, not triumphant, just distant, detached. When they emerged into the lobby, everything looked the same. The chandeliers still sparkled. The fountain still murmured. Guests checked in, laughed, complained about small things. But Clara felt as if she were walking through the ruins of a life no one else could see. She passed the front desk without stopping. The receptionist didn't look up. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, too indifferent. The security officer walked her to the employee parking lot and stopped. "This is where I leave you," he said gently. Clara nodded. She got into her car and closed the door. For a long moment, she didn't start the engine. She stared at the steering wheel, hands resting uselessly in her lap. Her reflection in the windshield looked older, smaller. She thought again of the man she had slapped, not of his authority, not of his power, but of the way he had looked at her afterward, steady, unyielding, and utterly uninterested in who she was supposed to be. Inside the resort, new messages were already being drafted, new procedures discussed, damage control underway. The system was correcting itself. But for Clara Hawthorne, the collapse was complete. And as she finally turned the key in the ignition, she understood something she had never allowed herself to consider before. That silence, repeated often enough, became permission, and permission, once revoked, left nothing standing. Upstairs, Ethan Ward sat with the ocean before him, unaware that the quiet reckoning he had started was only halfway done. Morning came quietly. The ocean outside Ethan Ward's window moved with the same patience it had the night before, waves folding and unfolding as if nothing in the world had been disturbed. Pale light crept across the floor, stopping just short of the desk where Mason's drawing still leaned against the lamp. Ethan woke before his alarm. Old habit. He lay still for a moment, listening to the distant hush of water, to the muted sounds of the resort beginning its day. Somewhere below, Carts rolled, doors opened and closed, coffee machines hissed awake. The world, it seemed, had decided to continue. He showered, dressed simply, and stood by the window with a cup of black coffee he hadn't ordered, but which had arrived anyway. He barely touched it. At precisely 9 o'clock, his phone vibrated. Daniel Reeves. Ethan answered. "I'm ready," he said. 10 minutes later, Daniel stood in the doorway again, this time accompanied by a woman Ethan hadn't met before. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, hair pulled back without vanity. She carried a thin tablet and nothing else. "This is Maya Chen," Daniel said. "Independent compliance lead. She's already begun the audit." Maya nodded once. "We didn't want this handled internally," Daniel added. "Too many blind spots." Ethan appreciated that more than the apology. "Sit," he said. They did. Maya tapped her tablet, bringing up a series of charts and notes, but she didn't look at them yet. She looked at Ethan first. "I want to be clear," she said. "This isn't about proving you right." Ethan met her gaze. "It's about proving the truth," he replied. She nodded, satisfied. "We started with the past 2 years of guest feedback," Maya said. "Formal complaints, informal comments, online reviews. Then we cross-referenced them with staffing schedules." Daniel shifted slightly in his seat. "There were patterns," Maya continued. "Not dramatic enough to trigger alarms, but consistent." She finally looked down at the tablet. Words like dismissive, unwelcoming, cold. Guests describing staff who avoided eye contact, who responded slower to some than others, who enforced rules rigidly for a few and flexibly for many. Ethan listened without interrupting. "We noticed something else," Maya said. "Most of the complaints didn't escalate. People didn't demand refunds. They didn't ask for managers. They just didn't come back." Daniel winced. "They left polite reviews," Maya continued. 3 stars, 4 sometimes, language carefully chosen. The kind of feedback businesses quietly survive. Ethan leaned back slightly. "And the staff?" he asked. Maya hesitated. "Clara Hawthorne was often on duty during those incidents," she said. "Not all, but enough." Daniel cleared his throat. "She was known for efficiency," he said, "for keeping VIP satisfaction high." Ethan nodded. "And everyone else learned what mattered." The sentence wasn't an accusation. It was a conclusion. Maya looked up again. "That's the heart of it," she said. "No one was told to discriminate, but they were shown, repeatedly, which guests were worth extra effort and which ones weren't." Ethan's fingers tapped once against the arm of the chair, a slow, thoughtful rhythm. "How many?" he asked. Maya answered without hesitation. "Enough that this isn't an incident," she said. "It's a culture." The word hung in the air. Culture. It was always easier to fire a person than to dismantle a culture. Easier to point at a face than to confront a pattern. Ethan stood and walked to the window again. He thought of the lobby, of the way he had been invisible until he wasn't, of how quickly attention had arrived when someone else entered wearing the right signals. "How deep does it go?" he asked. Maya followed him with her eyes. "Deeper than training," she said. "Shallower than intent. This is learned behavior, reinforced quietly, rewarded indirectly." Daniel rubbed his hands together. "We can fix this," he said quickly. "We'll update policies, retrain staff." Ethan turned. "No," he said gently. "We'll do more than that." Daniel stopped. "We'll change incentives," Ethan continued. "We'll change metrics. I don't want bonuses tied only to high-spend satisfaction. I want accountability tied to consistency." Maya's eyes sharpened. That will meet resistance, she said. I know. And it will cost you, Daniel added. Ethan nodded. It already has, he said. The difference is whether the cost means anything. He walked back to the desk and picked up Mason's drawing, held it lightly, as if reminding himself of something fragile. My son thinks the world works a certain way, he said. Not because it does, but because I want it to. Daniel swallowed. I won't build a place that teaches him the opposite. Maya closed her tablet. I'll draft a full report, she said, unfiltered. Some of it won't be comfortable. That's fine, Ethan replied. Comfort is how this started. She stood. I'll need autonomy, she said. No interference. You'll have it. Daniel rose as well, nodding. We'll begin implementing changes today. Ethan looked at both of them. This isn't damage control, he said. This is correction. They understood. When they left, the room grew quiet again. Ethan sat at the desk and set the drawing back in place. Outside, the sun climbed higher, bright and unapologetic. Downstairs, staff moved carefully now. Smiles measured, voices softer. A building learning slowly that something fundamental had shifted. Ethan knew better than to trust the first signs of change. Systems didn't transform overnight, but they could be forced to remember. And as he watched the ocean move with patient insistence, Ethan understood that what came next would not be public or dramatic. It would be slow, it would be uncomfortable, and it would test whether people truly believed what they claimed to stand for. A question that would not be answered today, but would begin tomorrow, when the first real consequences arrived. By late afternoon, the resort felt quieter, not in sound, but in posture. Staff moved with an attention that wasn't performative. Smiles appeared, then softened into something more careful. Doors were held a second longer. Eye contact lingered. It was the subtle choreography of people learning, in real time, that the rules they thought were invisible had suddenly been written in ink. Ethan Ward noticed all of it. He took a slow walk along the property's outer path, the one that traced the edge of the cliffs where the ocean pressed against stone. He needed the movement, the air, the sense of scale that came from watching something older than any system refuse to hurry. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. Daniel Reeves. Ethan answered without stopping. We've drafted the internal message, Daniel said. I wanted your approval before it goes out. Read it, Ethan said. Daniel did. The message was direct. It named the incident. It named the failure. It made no excuses. It stated clearly that discrimination, explicit or implied, would not be tolerated, and that accountability would be measured not by revenue protected, but by respect consistently given. When Daniel finished, there was a pause. It's honest, Ethan said. Send it. There was relief in Daniel's breath. One more thing, Daniel added. HR is asking how you want Clara's departure handled externally. Ethan stopped walking. The ocean surged below, waves breaking against rock with a sound like a held breath finally released. No public statement, Ethan said. No industry blacklist. No whisper campaigns. Daniel hesitated. That's unusual. I know. There was a reason Ethan hadn't spoken Clara's name since the night before. Not avoidance, deliberation. She crossed a line, Ethan continued, and she's paying for it. That's accountability. Turning her into a warning story would be something else. Which is erasure, Ethan said, and it teaches the wrong lesson. Daniel was quiet. She has a family, Ethan added. So do most people we fire when systems fail them slowly. I'm not interested in pretending this was a monster. It was a person who learned the wrong things and never unlearned them. I'll handle it discreetly, Daniel said. Thank you. Ethan ended the call and resumed walking. He thought of Clara Hawthorne sitting in her car, the resort shrinking in her rearview mirror. He did not imagine her humiliation with satisfaction. He imagined the hollow quiet that follows certainty when it collapses. He had known that quiet himself, in other seasons of his life, when success had demanded choices he hadn't wanted to make. Mercy, he had learned, was not the absence of consequence. It was the refusal to confuse consequence with cruelty. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone at the desk in his suite, Mason's drawing still propped where the lamplight could reach it. He opened his laptop and reviewed the draft of the audit framework Maya Chen had sent over. It was thorough, uncomfortable, necessary. Metrics were changing. Bonuses tied to guest feedback would be recalibrated to weight consistency over spend. Training would be scenario-based, not theoretical. Leadership reviews would include anonymous upward feedback, something Ethan knew would be resisted. He signed off on all of it. Then he closed the laptop and leaned back, rubbing his eyes. He felt tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. His phone buzzed again, this time with a photo. Mason, grinning, standing beside a half-built sandcastle in the backyard. The caption read, "Practice round. I'm getting better." Ethan smiled. He typed back, "Save some ideas for Saturday. We'll build the real one together." He set the phone down and let the quiet return. Downstairs, the evening shift had begun. New faces at the desk, a different cadence. Guests checked in with the same luggage and the same expectations, unaware of the internal recalibration happening beneath the chandeliers. That was how change usually worked, Ethan knew. Not as a spectacle, as maintenance. A knock came at the door. Ethan opened it to find Daniel again, looking less tense than before. "Everything's moving," Daniel said. "Some pushback, but nothing unmanageable." "Good," Ethan replied. Daniel lingered a moment. "I wanted to say something," he said, "about not destroying her career. Most people in your position would have." Ethan considered that. "Most people confuse strength with dominance," he said. "I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to be precise." Daniel nodded, understanding something new. When the door closed, Ethan returned to the window. Night had settled fully now, the ocean a dark, restless expanse. Lights from the resort traced clean lines against the cliff, orderly and bright. He thought of the lobby again, not as it had been, but as it could be. A place where someone in a plain t-shirt could walk in tired and be met with the same courtesy as anyone else. Not because policy demanded it, but because culture remembered it. Tomorrow, Mason would arrive. Tomorrow, Ethan would walk into that lobby again, not as a test, not as a reveal, but as a father holding his son's hand. That, he knew, would be the real measure, because systems could promise change. But they only proved it when no one was watching. And the final answer would come not with applause or headlines, but with a quiet moment at the front desk, when a child walked in and was seen. Mason arrived just after noon. Ethan waited near the entrance this time, not as a test, not as a statement, but because it was easier to see the parking area from there. The sun was high, the ocean bright, the breeze carrying the kind of warmth that made children impatient. When Mason stepped out of the car, backpack crooked on one shoulder, bucket and shovel clutched like treasures, he spotted his father instantly. "Dad!" He ran. Ethan knelt without thinking, catching him mid-stride, arms wrapping tight around a body that smelled of sunscreen and crayons. Mason laughed into his shoulder, breathless and happy, the sound grounding Ethan more effectively than any ocean view ever could. "Is this the place?" Mason asked, pulling back to look around with wide eyes. "This is it," Ethan said. "What do you think?" Mason stared up at the glass walls, the palm trees, the open doors that let the light pour in. "It's big," he said, reverent. Then with a child's perfect logic, "Are people nice?" Ethan paused. "Yes," he said finally. "They are." They walked inside together. The lobby felt different, not because of flowers or lighting, but because of attention. A young woman at the front desk looked up immediately and smiled, not wide or rehearsed, just present. "Welcome," she said. "How can I help you?" Ethan felt something ease in his chest. "We're checking in," he said. "Ward." She typed, nodded, and looked back up, this time at Mason. "Is this your first time at the beach?" she asked. Mason nodded vigorously. "Yes. We're building a sandcastle, a big one." "That sounds important," she said seriously. "I hope it survives the tide." Mason considered that, then grinned. "We'll make it strong." They were handed keys, no towels, no juice, no spectacle, just courtesy. As they turned away, Mason tugged at Ethan's hand. "Dad," he whispered, "she talked to me." Ethan smiled. "Yes," he said. "She did." Upstairs, Mason dropped his things and ran straight to the window, pressing his face against the glass. "It's real," he said softly. "The ocean is really there." Ethan watched him for a moment, then sat on the edge of the bed and let the quiet arrive. Later, they walked the beach together, shoes in hand, sand cool beneath their feet. Mason built with complete seriousness, consulting his crayon blueprint as if it were an engineering document. Ethan followed instructions, handing over shells, digging trenches, reinforcing walls. When the castle was finished, crooked and proud, Mason stepped back and nodded. "This one's better," he declared. "Why?" Ethan asked. "Because you helped," Mason said, as if the answer were obvious. They sat side by side, watching the water inch closer. "Dad?" Mason said after a while. "Yes." "Why did that lady yesterday look so mad?" Ethan had known this question would come. He considered his answer carefully, not because he wanted to soften the truth, but because he wanted to shape it. "Sometimes," he said, "people forget that everyone deserves respect, and when they're reminded, it feels uncomfortable." "Did she forget about you?" Ethan looked out at the water. "She forgot to see me," he said, "and that matters." Mason frowned. "That's not nice." "No," Ethan agreed. "It isn't." Mason watched a wave collapse into foam. "What did you do?" Ethan thought of the call, the room, the changes set in motion, the cost. "I didn't yell," he said. "I didn't hit back. I just didn't accept being treated badly." Mason nodded slowly, absorbing it. "Like when you tell me not to let kids push me around," he said. "Yes," Ethan replied. "Exactly like that." That evening, after Mason fell asleep exhausted and sunburned and happy, Ethan stood alone on the balcony. The resort below glowed softly, orderly and calm. Somewhere inside it, people were adjusting, learning, resisting, trying again. The system would never be perfect. He knew that. But it could be honest. His phone buzzed with a final message from Maya Chen. First phase complete, changes implemented, more to come. Ethan typed back a single word: good. He thought of Clara Hawthorne, not with bitterness, but with a distant hope that she would sit somewhere someday and understand what had happened, not as punishment, but as a mirror. He thought of the guests who would walk into this place without knowing its history, of the ones who would be greeted simply because greeting was the rule again. And he thought of Mason, asleep inside, dreaming of castles that held. Ethan did not believe in dramatic endings. He believed in quiet ones. In the small, unrecorded moments where a child learned what dignity looked like by watching a parent refuse to surrender it. Tomorrow the tide would wash away the sandcastle, but the lesson would remain. That respect is not earned by appearance. That power is not proven by volume. And that the measure of any place, any system, is how it treats the people who arrive with nothing to offer but their presence. The ocean moved steadily in the dark, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan Ward felt certain that this quiet, imperfect certainty was enough.